Good morning, everyone. As I, as I was already introduced, I am Ossi Hanhinen, and I'm going to talk to you about being human in the Elm community. Now, this subject is a little uncommon, maybe. It came to me when our company was having a diversity and inclusivity workshop with New Visions who do this kind of stuff. And it was laid out on the first day that the first step to inclusivity is realizing that every person you work with is a human being. And I started thinking that this is kind of something that we don't think about in programming culture in general. But I think it's kind of a common thing in the Elm community. Now, this talk is a little unconventional in its format as well. It's laid out a little bit like an applied philosophy lecture. So it's meant to provoke thought. So if you have any sort of weird trains of thought, just follow them. You can come back and revisit the talk afterwards anyway. And also, if something seems irrelevant to you, just let it go. Focus on the next thing. So, speaking of philosophy, I was in a philosophy lecture not too far ago, where the Finnish philosopher, I'm not seeing any slides. There's supposed to be an XY axis on screen. And the x-axis represents accomplishments and skills and job titles and degrees. So all the kind of stuff that you would put on a CV or what you would put on social media. Now the y-axis, on the other hand, represents empathy, humanity, and love for life. Well, it doesn't matter. It really is just the two axes. And so Esa Saarinen made this point that as a society, we really focus too much on the x-axis, the accomplishments and the skills and stuff like that. So much so that we actually start to neglect the y-axis altogether. This sounds a little abstract, so I will I will illustrate this with a story of someone close to me. So this person started his computing sciences studies in 2006 and studied full-time for about 4 years, then started working more and studying less. And he never got a degree, even though at 5 years you're supposed to get the master's degree. He never got even the bachelor's degree. And yeah, he was working all the time, but he was getting a little anxious and ashamed of the fact that he didn't have a degree. So he started feeling ashamed, so much so that when his family started talking about how is the master's thesis going, he started making up stories of how the studies are progressing, even though they weren't. And today, he's been working in this industry for about almost 8 years, I think, at this point. But he still catches himself sometimes feeling like a fraud because of this fact. Now, so last year, he reapplied to finish up the bachelor's degree. And now that he's close to getting that degree, he's starting to actually see and appreciate how much he has accomplished in his life and what he has become. That person is me. once I finish this philosophy course, I will finally be able to put these magical letters BSc on my resume and move on. So that's how easy it is to just focus on the x-axis and not realize what you have in your life. Now, on the other hand, the y-axis can really be a driver. And I realized that it is for me when I'll be building this tiny application that shows the regional train schedules in Finland or in Helsinki area. And we had a snowstorm one morning. And someone tweeted me that they were really thankful of the live data application I had made because they saved considerable time waiting in the snowstorm. And that warm feeling that I got from that, I realized that's the biggest reward I can get. Okay, I still have no slides, but bear with me. Luckily, this is a talk that doesn't involve any code examples. So we're not just the developer role that we put on in these kind of circumstances, or in meetings, or especially in GitHub. Look around in the audience. Each one of these people has feelings. They have families, hobbies, friends, childhood memories. So take a moment and just appreciate that. They have beliefs, they have neck and shoulder pains. They have poorly slept nights, and they have their unique views of the world. They are beings that experience colors and hunger and sexuality and scents, all in their own way. And any one of them might have a story similar to mine. Okay, this part here would need a picture. So let's hope this works. Sweet. This would have been hard to explain. So, what we have here is the evolutionary tree on Earth. The part that I've circled there is the origin of all evolution. So the two small branches on the left are archaea and bacteria, and the larger branch to the right is eukaryotes. And if you look at the very tip of the eukaryotes branch, I've labeled 3 things. Number 1 is plants, number 2 is fungi, and number 3 is animals. So from this perspective, we're not that far from being actual elm trees. And especially, we're not that far from being some other animal. So what I'm trying to say here is that what makes us what we are is really down to the evolutionary history on Earth. And I would say that most of it is beyond the conscious thought. But what really sets us apart from all the other species is communication and how we communicate. So let's make good use of that. So what is humanity in Elm? I would say it's asking beginner questions. It's making mistakes. It's not knowing everything to begin with. Losing interest in what you've worked on. And not being present 24/7. And realizing that everything I've mentioned is okay and is actually expected. Now, Elm claims to be a delightful language, and I would say it's because it has empathy built in. It's an immutable and pure language, which makes it so that you don't need to focus on too many things at a given time. You don't need to commit too many things in memory. The error messages are definitely made for humans, with links to further reading, and they might even understand where you're coming from, like the triple equals sign error message, which says that there's no triple equals sign in Elm like there is in JavaScript, and you should switch to using the double equals sign instead. The compiler also goes, look here, work on this thing next. So it keeps focus. There's an entire talk about this subject, actually, by Luke Westby called Compilers as Therapists. At the language design level, concepts are being phased out, like Richard just mentioned, and syntax is being removed every release, which allows the language to grow simpler over time, making it easier for newcomers to learn, instead of it growing bigger and getting all the time harder to grasp as a whole. The packages have enforced documentation, so every single function that you have in a package has to be documented in order for the package to be publishable. And they also have semantic versioning enforced, which means that as a package author, you don't need to worry about breaking someone else's code inadvertently when you're making changes to the code. Now, I would go as far as to say we're a delightful community. I think beginners are treated with respect. Their questions are answered. We don't just go look at the docs or read the manual on Slack. XY problems are found and solved on the Slack each day. And as a community, we embrace new ideas. Like Richard has talked about Elm UI, or style elements as it was called before, with the utmost respect. He thinks it's so cool to have something like that in the world. We also strive for a better world. There are packages like Theresa Sokol's line charts and Tessa Kelly's accessible HTML, which incorporate some really big ideas right in the package design. The line charts package is based on the ideas of Edward Tufte, who is a really famous and legendary person in information visualization. And Tessa Kelly's accessible HTML utilizes the type system in Elm to help you make your code accessible by default by, for example, disallowing click handlers on divs when you should be using buttons instead. We're also pretty accepting of breaking changes, which I think is crucial for package evolution. The package authors do not know everything to begin with. They can have design sessions and they can have like very educated guesses of how the API should look like. But like Richard also talked about, it really boils down to making a first version and then getting ideas from that, getting feedback from the users and people who see the code, then designing again and publishing a new version, a new breaking version, just to make the API nicer. This is what leads us to iterate towards better designs. And this is a stark contrast to, for example, the NPM packages, where major releases cause major upgrade pains for the people, especially when there's like dependencies of dependencies. They can really fall behind because of how hard it is to upgrade something in JavaScript. So that leads them to avoid major releases at almost all costs, which is a problem for iterating towards better designs. So in conclusion, here's the graph that I was talking about. I think we rank pretty high on the y-axis already, so let's keep that up. I think that the humanity and empathy are what set this community apart and what brings in new people with new ideas. And embracing those new ideas is how packages evolve. And all this leads to happier people and a better package ecosystem. I thank you for your attention. I really appreciate it. If you got any ideas from this talk, please don't hesitate to find me. I would be glad to talk to you. Thank you.